Payment methods and treasury management. So the key points in this chapter are there are different methods to pay and receive money. Each has their advantages and disadvantages and timings that you'll need to remember and apply in the exam. For example, a standing order is applicable to a fixed and regular amount. A direct debit is applicable to a variable and regular amount. So this chapter is going to consider the various methods by which a company may receive or make payments and approaches to treasury management. And the payment methods, there's going to be many different ways payments can be made, and each has their own advantages and disadvantages, as well as timings that the payment will take to set up and to process. In the exam, you're going to be presented with a scenario and asked to choose the appropriate payment method. That's one option. You might be given a payment method and determine the advantages or disadvantages or the timings of the payment, or you might have to just state the timings of payments, which ones are immediate, which ones come out later on from your bank account. So there are going to be advantages and disadvantages based upon whether you're the customer or whether you're the seller. So let's just get through them. And what you're really going to have is it's almost like one of these child's toys here. Each of the payment methods is a particular shape. You've got to fit them into the right slots. You might be given 4 of them. And can have some advantages. You might really know 3 of them, and then you slot those in, and then the 4th one drops out that you might not be quite sure about, but it's not one of the other ones. But it's a bit like one of those toys, really, where you're going to sort of fit the payment into the shape. So let's just make a start, really, and we've got cash here. So cash is just physical notes and coins. So that's what we're talking about cash here. We're talking about cash. We're not talking about cash sales. Payments that aren't on sales that aren't on credit. We're talking about physical notes and coins being used to make payments in here. If you've got some small amounts, small denominations, typically for expenses, we're going to see something like that's going to be petty cash in there. Whether you'll see that as an option or not, it'll typically be cash, but you might see petty cash as an option as well. And the advantages of cash, well, it's an immediate payment to be received by the company. It's very convenient for customers, so they like if they like to use cash. I don't particularly like it. I'd rather use my debit card, but some customers really like to use cash, really. So immediate payment to the company can be convenient for customers, and you can. That's the key one, not necessarily said in the AT thing, but the real reason why you use cash within a company for expenses is that it can stop having expenses claim forms. So if somebody comes along and they buy a £2 jar of coffee for the team meetings, and that if we actually process that through the wages system, and so we're going to have an expenses claim form that's signed off by a manager, goes through into finance. They set it up in terms of payment for that through the wages system, whatever. By the time we finish, we've racked up £15 to £20 worth of costs to process this £2 jar of coffee. If we've just got a petty cash tin, then we can take all that expenses out. There's a petty cash receipt. It's quite simple, and probably only cost us a few pound or something to process that in terms of staff time. Disadvantages, well, there's potential for theft. So you wouldn't send large amounts of cash through the post, let's say, because that can be easily stolen. And if you hold large amounts of cash on site as well, you become a target for violent criminals who come in and steal your safe and whatever. The money has to be banked. So if you take cash, we've got to bank it as well, and there's an associated staff cost with that. So quite often you'll see shops sort of use a bit of cash, but also have a debit card at the same, a debit machine at the same time, really. If they can then get rid of the cash that they take in, that's always quite useful. And there's the need to close it off there, but there's a need to reconcile the cash amount. So we've got a cash till in there. We need to reconcile that amount up. Timings of cash, immediate. So it's immediate payment. Whenever we pay it into the bank, but there is of course that time to get it into the bank as well, which can be a faff. Right, so checks. So this is a piece of paper, and it sets out who's going to be paid, the payee. So accounts payee is what the checks are. The amounts to be paid, which amounts to be paid in there, and then it'll say which bank accounts it's going to come from, the dates, whatever. It must be, the big advantage of checks is it must be paid by the payee, so the person whose names we put onto the check, into their accounts to receive the funds, and it can't be used by anybody else. We have this little crossed thing that goes across a check that says account payee, and it can't be then paid in. You can't steal it and then pay it into your own bank account, because that just means that it can't be done. So the advantage is difficult to steal because it's addressed to a particular payee. So if you're going to send a payment through the post, it'll be a check that goes to the post. It's a physical item that can be provided. So some people like a physical item, and then let's say we're going to have a big, this is how much we raised for cancer research, whatever. And then you have a big check, so it can show that, which would be quite nice. And it can be posted with a remittance advice to say, look, we're posting. Also, by posting it, we can slow up payment as well. So we can slow up payment by saying is checks in the post. So that can be a bit of an advantage to the payer. Now, the disadvantage is, are checks really used in real life? No, they're not really. Costly to generate because somebody's going to write it out. You know, we're going to have it coming from a check printing machine or whatever. That's all just expensive and a big faff. And we've also got to reconcile it into the bank reconciliation as well to see what's been paid. So it's actually expensive to be able to run checks and to administer them. It can be costly to bank. They're annoying. They come in. You've got to sort of open the post. People got to open the post, and then we've got to like put these. So we've got to bank this. We're going to take these checks along to the bank. You know, faffing around, quite a lot of time really to do it. They're just very, very expensive to actually sort of process really. And there's a time, you know, if you're the supplier, you've got this check coming in the post, and we all know that everyone's trying to con us that the check's in the post. That's just annoying as well, really. And the last one is that the payer might not have the funds, so they might send you a check, but the check might bounce. So the check only gets paid if there's sufficient funds in the account of the person who writes out the check. So if you're sort of saying, I want to buy a car, and you rock up to a car dealership and you sort of write them out a check for £20,000, they're going to go, that's really interesting, but we're not having that because we don't know whether the funds are in your account. So we won't be having that, thank you very much. And so you're quite limited in terms of what you actually really can pay for checks with, really, because there isn't that certainty of payment. In terms of timings, I said see below because this is out of the book. In terms of timings, actually, it's going to be quite difficult because it used to be that it would be, say, 7 days in the post for a second-class post, and then 1 day, and then 3 days for the bank to clear. It would be only 1 day if you happen to pay the check into the same branch of the same bank that the payer had actually sort of written the check out. So let's say the Barclays Bank branch of Birkenhead, and you happen to also, the payee happened to also branch with the Barclays Bank of Birkenhead. Try to say that quickly. Then it would go out in 1 day, but that's so remote and very unlikely that really it's really 3 days. The examiner might have set a particular thing that would mean it would be 1 day, and that was in the past. But recently, and only very recently, banks have introduced automatic scanning of checks and overnight clearance. So actually now checks clear in 1 day in most banks. You know, you'd have to be some kind of really remote bank that you wouldn't have this automatic clearing. So, you know, the likes of Barclays or HSBC or whatever, they're going to have the scanning machines. They're going to clear it overnight. So will the examiner go anywhere near the timings? Probably not. In there because it's unusual now. Some banks use it, some banks don't. So you've not got a specific answer there. So you might sort of see in times with checks about, you know, the fact that it's just not immediate, or it won't be after, or it'll be after 3 days, or wherever it'll be, or something like that. Really, the time to post and then at least 1 day to clear, but the times will be quite difficult. If the examiner did go for timings and times to clear, I'd still probably stick with 3 days. I don't think the examiner will have caught up to the fact that it's now 1 day, but who knows, really. I just think the examiner should stay away from that as a question. If it does come up and you're there going, blooming heck, it could be one thing, could be another, you're just going to have to roll with it and just move on, because don't worry, I mean, in this book, I'm going to teach you how to be scoring, you know, in the high 90s anyway. So there's no real problem with that, really. Somewhere along the lines, there's always going to be some point of ambiguity. Just don't lose your head in the exam. Right, bank drafts. So this is a piece of paper, and what's actually happening here is if a check hasn't transferred the money or anything. I mean, we're not sure about the check in terms of whether it's actually got funds in the account or not. With the bank draft, we have got a surety. You know, that what happens here with the bank draft is the money's already taken out of the account and put onto the piece of paper. So let's say this £20,000 has been taken out of the account and put into this bank draft, and that's got certainty of payment. You know, it is £20,000. So you can then go and bank that, and you know it's £20,000. So it's really useful for selling large items like a car, theoretically. Does a car dealership really want to be you handing over bank draft? No, just do a bank transfer. Thank you very much. But you know, let's just say we've got bank draft. It's on the syllabus, and so it can be used as a better version of a check. So physical item that can be handed over. You'll see this kind of thing. Physical item that can be handed over that's got a surety that the funds are available. Bank draft. Okay. Certainly the funds exist, but it is a potential for it to be fraudulent. You know, they could have a forged bank draft, which why nobody's going to accept them anyway. Disadvantages, potential for fees. You know, the bank's not going to produce that for free, so why wouldn't you just use a CHAPS system? Can be cancelled, but with a lot of difficulty. So you could cancel it, but it's a lot of difficulty to actually get it done. But of course, this £20,000 that you're rolling around with, or even could be even more than that, really, has a potential to be stolen. So you could, you know, knock over the head the bank draft taken off you, and then they pay it into their account and off they go. Will they really do that? Not quite sure. But anyway, that's where we are in terms of bank drafts. The timing is immediate. It's paid. So it's it's not likely to be, because you're not going to post this through the post. Checks go through the post, but bank drafts wouldn't really, for that potential for theft. So it's there in the syllabus. Checks are there in the syllabus. Are they really used in the modern age? Not really. There was a move to Outlook, to get rid of checks, and then everybody got a bit of a taste of nostalgia. But they don't really make any sense anymore, really. Right, so debit cards then. So this is a card. It's got bank details on. You'll have debit cards, and there's PIN number for to sort of protect it, and it allows the transfer of funds from one bank to another. It's called a debit card because it's debit the bank statement, so from the bank's point of view, even though it's money coming out, so it'll be credit from the cash book's point of view. But remember, bank always says everything from its own perspective, really. So a debit, they call it a debit card, and short delay for payment, so it'll come out the day after. So only 1 day. So if you're 1 day for the money to come out of the bank account into the seller's account. Big advantage is customer convenience, way easier. You can still have some fraud from bank card fraud, but it's harder than with cash to sort of make this to steal. Only 1 day delay in the receipt of funds. Disadvantages for the supplier can be a fixed cost to implement all the card machines or whatever, and there's possibility of card fraud. So sometimes you do still have some holdout suppliers who sort of cash only, whatever, which I find a bit annoying, but it's possible. Okay, credit cards. So credit cards, not a debit card, because debit cards are immediate. Credit cards actually provide credit. So they provide a credit up to a certain amount there, and they're paid then at a later date. So the customer gets credit for up to a month. So let's say, and typically what happens is that they get a bill at the end of the month, and then it's going to be paid in a few days or whatever. So let's say you made a payment in the first of the month, you got your bill at the end of the month, you're actually getting a month's worth of credit in here. So you got a credit, so you got some credit here. There's only 1 day delay for the receipt of funds for the seller. So there, it's like almost like a debit card for the seller sort of side. The customer is very convenient in there, and there is fraud and insolvency protection for the customer. So let's say a company, you pay a deposit for something, and so you buy some goods, but in the meantime, the company's got bankrupt. With a debit card, you've lost your money. With a credit card, you've got protection for that, really, because you haven't actually bought it, the bank's bought it. It also allows us an employee. So let's say we've got an employee and we've got a salesperson, and they're going around and they're going to hotels and they're paying for meals and whatever. They could use their debit card, money coming out of their bank account, and then they could claim back expenses. We've got to process an expense claim. That's expensive. Or alternatively, they could use a company credit card. And so they could use a company credit card, and that allows us to this person to go and use that amount not coming out of their account, and we can reconcile it up at the end of the month. The disadvantage of them, well, it's not free money. There's a high transaction charge. So typically between 1.5 and 2.5% of the transaction is taken from the seller, and the bank charges the seller. Now, there's a disadvantage with that in that the disadvantage that comes with that is that, okay, if we're in the hotels or whatever, then hotels are used to taking credit cards, and that's part of the deal. If you go along and you try and buy £20,000 worth of computers from a computer wholesaler, that's not the deal, and they'll add that transaction charge onto the price. There's high interest rates if you don't settle the debit card, if you don't settle the credit card. So if you don't settle the debt, and then they'll start to charge you somewhere between 15% and 25%, typically 25%. And so that's very expensive debt, compared to, let's say, a loan, even a company startup loans, which are like sort of 10% or whatever. So very expensive to use a credit card now. And it would allow, let's say we're giving this company credit card to somebody, it does allow them to use expenses that we'd otherwise reject. So for, like, say, alcohol, which we don't like them to have. Timings: receipt by the supplier 1 day after the transaction, and for payment, the bills is at the end of the month, so you could have up to 30 days credit. So that's where we are for that month for credit cards. Charge cards is not on the syllabus, but it's like a debit card for companies. Let's say if we had one for, let's say, Shell, so I'll leave it on the screen, you can read your way through it. And but let's say we have some kind of fuel thing, and we have our people going out driving company cars. They go and use these things for paying at Shell garages or whatever. And so it's basically a supplier card, a charge card, really, for companies. We can have some rebates on it in there, but it might allow payments that otherwise we rejected. But then again, we might not be, or we may actually be able to to restrict the payments. So we might be able to restrict them, or alternatively we might not. It depends upon the charge card. So we might be able to restrict the payments as well. To certain items. Certain items. Timing's one day after the transaction for the payments to go through. Now we're getting back to the normal things you're going to see in the exam. So Bacs in here, this is a transfer from one bank's bank account to another, typically set up as a number of payments made at a time. So let's say we're paying suppliers or wages, the monthly back run for suppliers or the monthly payment for wages in there. Big advantage is immediate payment on the day when the Bacs payment is paid up for, but a disadvantage, you've got to set it up 3 days in advance. It can be cancelled up to the point of payment if it's incorrect. So that's an advantage over let's say a CHAPS thing or something like that. And there's no transaction cost, although for a company, the bank's going to try and charge, transaction payments. So it's not free like a domestic bank account. Banks try and charge it early there. Timing is going to be immediate on the day. So Bacs payment set up 3 days notice in advance is the big disadvantage of Bacs payments. Faster payments though can be done with up to 2 hours notice, so it's faster. So it's immediate payment on the day. No requirement of advance notice like CHAPS. Big disadvantage though, typically restricted. It's up to £25,000, but could be up to £100,000, but probably more like 25,000 that we sort of have in there. So up to £100,000 used to be the sort of limit, but you sort of see it creeping down, and it's now sort of like around about 25,000 quid. So let's say instead of using a bank draft for your car, this £20,000 car, you could use the faster payment system and bank transfer it. There'd be no bank charge, which is an advantage really. And that's what you typically use there for that. And the faster payment system, it's like a Bacs payment, but it's just faster. But what happens if we have a payment that goes over the faster payments limit that the bank sort of sets in there? Well, if you're using that, we're going to go into CHAPS, and CHAPS is still going to use the faster payment system. So it's going to use that faster payment system, but it's going to be for large amounts. It's an immediate payment, so there's no 2 hour delay, but it cannot be cancelled, so it's paid. Now, CHAPS is very much used for larger purchases or land and buildings. Larger purchases because it's gone over the faster payment system. Land and buildings because land and buildings is unlike any other contract. In normal contracts, you offer something, they accept it, and there's consideration, that's a contract and can be enforced. Land and buildings can't be. Land and buildings can only be enforced when it's actually sealed, when the contract's actually signed and the money's paid. That's there. So there's not a question of offer and acceptance within house purchases. It's a question of the actual conveyancing being done really. So the advantage of CHAPS systems, immediate payment on the day, doesn't require notice, so there's no 2 hour delay in there, but cannot be cancelled, which is an advantage for land and building purchases, and there's no limit on the payment amounts. Disadvantage though, can't be cancelled, and there's going to be a bank charge, 25 quid. So let's say you're going to sort of where you're going to sort of see CHAPS payments, you can see big amounts, and you can see land and buildings. That's going to be what we're going to see for CHAPS payments. Standing orders. Now, standing orders and then direct debits. Now, standing orders, regular fixed amounts, direct debits, regular variable amounts. So it gives the supplier a mandate, so a standing order mandate, take out of the bank account this amount. So let's say we set up a phone contract, take out £35 on the 1st of every month for the next, sort of 24 months or whatever. Fixed amount. So a regular fixed amount is a standing order. So it gives the supplier more confidence they're going to be paid in there, so they might give some kind of discount for setting up a standing order, and it's an effective way of being accurate and payments being done on time. So if you set them all up there. This is a big disadvantage though, is that the payer can go on and cancel it. So in the introduction to bookkeeping unit, you might sort of see where I'm sort of saying about recurring journals for payments, income and payments in there, and I'm saying that they're not a great idea because circumstances can change, and this is the reason why, because the payer might cancel it. So if we set up a regular recurring journal for an income amount in there, we're assuming that the payer is going to not cancel their standing order, but of course they can do. And then we've got it going through the books as they've been paid and they paid us and they haven't. And the only way we would see it would be in the bank reconciliation, which we'll see in the next chapter. But that would put a heck of a delay into the whole thing if it was picked up at all. So this reason here is the reason why I don't really like recurring journals for income and payments. Don't really like it at all, to be honest with you, but this is the reason why I wouldn't like it for income and payments. Don't think it's appropriate. And the timing's immediate on the date of payment. Direct credit is like a standing order, but the opposite way around. It's sort of money being pushed from the customer's account to the seller's accounts. So we could push it from our, to pay for employee expenses or utilities. And there's we're paying fixed amounts in advance. So that's where, if we're going to see it at all, I've never seen a direct credit question. It's in the syllabus, but I've never seen a question on it, so I couldn't tell you how it's worded in there. But it's for regular payments, and it's the flip side where from the standing order, it's the supplier taking the money out of the account. For the direct credit, it's the customer putting the money into the account. And then it says you could set them up for amounts of payments to set up for. So you can do regular payments all in one go. So let's say you could pay Michael, a 12 months worth of his salary, and you could set it all up in one go. Theoretically, a bit like a recurring journal, but you could make mistakes. Michael might leave, 6 months in, and you keep paying me, and I'm going, thank you very much, that's great. And so you can have this sort of mistakes in here, and the disadvantage, money goes out of the account immediately. Time is immediate there. So would you really use them to do wages expenses? No, you just set up a Bacs payment run and it'd alter, because people's salaries alter and people's expenses claims alter as well. So it doesn't really work as the example given. Direct debit. So we've now got regular variable amounts. So there's going to be some amount coming out every month, let's say, first of the month, but it's going to be different. Utilities, particularly that kind of energy bills, insurance, that kind of stuff. It's going to vary. Yeah. So it gives more confidence that the supply might be trade, but the payer can cancel it whenever they feel like. Yeah. And it's a way of being more accurate. We set up one thing up in advance, and we've got it running once, but of course it's going to vary anyway. So how accurate can it be? It's really more that the supplier's got confidence on payment really. The supplier though can now deduct the payment of whatever they want to deduct. And they could be wrong, or alternatively, they might just decide to take out the money from our account anyway for goods that are faulty. And so we've lost our biggest stick to sort of get those goods replaced or things fixed, but we've paid for the goods. Well, that's not working really. So would we ever agree a direct debit for the supply of goods? No, we would never agree a direct debit for a supply of goods, because the goods might be faulty and the supplier's taking the money anyway, and they're going, well, what are you going to do about it? We've got your money, sue us if you want to. Whereas if you flip side and you've actually not paid the money and you go, well, fix the goods, fix the work that you've done, or we're not going to pay you, they're pretty much going to turn up and fix the goods and do what's required. Timing's going to be immediate on the day of payment for a direct debit. I've included mobile phone banking here because I highlighted faster payments had a limit. So let's say the car that we wanted to buy was 26,000 in there. We could do faster payments for 25,000 and a mobile banking transfer for 1,000, and we could avoid the fee. It's not in the syllabus, it's not referred to. That's what we would do in reality. And that's probably how you're going to pay a lot of your bills in reality as well, in terms of mobile banking transfers and just bank transfers. So in a company, you'd have the banking app as well with the bank that you'd use to download bank statements or whatever. You can make bank transfers through it. So it's convenient, it's immediate. There is a potential to make mistakes and send it to the wrong account. The money just come out of the account immediately, which can be good or bad depending on who you are, and the time will be immediate. I've included it just in case the examiner does decide to break out into more modern payment methods instead of talking about checks and bank drafts, but it is not referred to in the syllabus. So that's our payment methods, and now we've got treasury management here. So that's the sort of the last part of this type of question. And in treasury management, the objective is to pay as late as possible. So we're going to pay our debts as late as possible, but not too late. So not too late. So late as possible, but not too late. So we don't pay immediately. That might be given as an option. Definitely, we don't do that. And we don't pay later than the credit terms. We don't do that either. So we're going to pay as late as possible, but not too late. So we don't want to miss out on prompt payment discounts. We don't want to end up in a situation where the supplier suddenly goes, well, you never pay on time, so I'm going to price the part of late payment into the prices I'm going to offer you. Or alternatively, they might just say, we're not going to trade with you altogether. Now, there's another thing as well. It's not too late as to get bad publicity either. So we might end up in a situation whereby, let's say, in the business awareness unit, you might see a point where there'll be a supermarket and they're struggling a bit, so they decide to pay all their farmers late. Well, that wouldn't work at all, because the farmers would go to the local press or national press or whatever and say supermarket X was being really bad and they're paying for all the milk late, we're all going out of business, and that's such bad publicity, they don't do it. Similarly, you have to put on your supplier terms into your financial accounts as well. So it's not great in terms of that. You pretty much pay in terms of your credit terms, and you don't actually intend to gouge your suppliers either. You tend to sort of go for 30 days at the most. You could sort of say, well, I'm going to 60 days or 90 days, and what are you going to do about it? Well, they're going to cry to the national press, so you don't really want to do that as a supermarket. And there are some suppliers or some liabilities who say, well, that's already interesting that you won't want to pay late, but I think you'll find I'm going to fine you for that. So HMRC, your government, says you don't pay your tax on time, I'm going to charge you, and you're going to fine you, and then we're going to charge you interest on the fine and the initial amounts as well. So they're going to be very draconian and make you pay on time, so you have to pay them on time, unless you're sort of saying, well, look, we're going to be bankrupt otherwise, in which case you have to have a discussion with them. Much more advanced things. You'll never have to have a discussion about that. Some suppliers as well might have already fixed that into their sort of terms. So they might say you're going to pay late, and we're going to charge you interest. So that is our this chapter. In terms of our bridge to the next chapter, you can see that times of payments lead to differences between the bank statement and the cash book. And so in the next chapter, we're going to reconcile that cash book to the bank statement, accounting for those timing differences. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next one.